And I know since then I've been involved in the Bhopal struggle that Gary was talking about, and I did, after they started that hunger strike, I started doing it. I took my truck, I had a blue truck, and I parked it right in front of that chemical plant. And every day, those people, those workers, and the Halliburton, because they got contract worker theirs. Every time they came through, and every time the management came through, I would just hand them another piece of fact about Bhopal, India, because I guarantee you the corporation wants them to believe that it's over, it's done with. It's like we don't know what is going on there anymore because we took care of it and we paid them off a long time before, and it's over and done with. And every day I would just hand out a little piece of information about them, and then around 30 days, I think, like Gary said, there was over 1,000 people had joined. Over 8 different countries got involved, and the end result of all of that action across the world, the Indian government reversed their decision there. And matter of fact, put out an extradition for Warren Anderson. And it was right after that I had, because I had been, you sit there and watch a plant for 30 days, and you really start paying attention to the towers they've got. And I started thinking, that tower would look real good with the big long banner hanging from it. And the thing with it is, it's so funny because this was after 9/11, and and there was this real worry about terrorists getting those big round tanks. You get in there and you hit one of those tanks with a bullet, and you're going to have a catastrophe. But the chemical corporations, they said, no, we don't need to worry about reducing the stockpiling of all those chemicals because we got these real high fences, and nobody's going to get into our plants because we got real high fences. Well, right after I had done that hunger strike, about 2 days later, I got my truck that had been there for 30 days, that blue truck. It's got a loud muffler. I drove into the plant. And I was just checking out the fence, because I was inside the plant, but I wasn't over the fence yet. And I was looking at that fence to see if that was an electric fence or not. Because if it was electric, I might have some problems. But it was like, no, I don't think that's electric. So what I did is I went home and I got a hard hat, and I live on the Gulf of Mexico, so there's a lot of oil rigs out in the bay. And there's always workers out there, and the wind comes along, whips off their hard hats. And so we got this whole line of hard hats just floating into my town all the time. So, I got a collection of about 10 hard hats. And so I picked up a hard hat, I put on some sunglasses, and the next morning when it came time that I knew those workers went into that plant, I just went out on the road and just started in my jeans, just started walking down the road. And sure enough, here comes a truck, load of workers, and they think I'm a worker that don't have a ride, so they say, you want a ride? And I say, why, sure, just give me a ride. And so they took me all the way inside that plant. And as soon as they went to their unit, I just went over, threw my banner over the fence, scaled the fence, and then there was a tower, about a 75-foot tower, and I proceeded to climb that tower, and I went all the way to the top. And I had got some chain, and I had got some pipe, and I hadn't taken Greenpeace's or the Ruckus Society. I hadn't taken their training on how do you chain yourself inside that. But I'd been a rigger on a shrimp boat long enough. I figured out how to do it. But anyway, I had been on that top of that tower for an hour and a half. They never knew I was there, and I was getting really bored about sitting up there. And so finally I saw a security man truck going past. So I stood up and started waving at him. And pretty soon, sure enough, there was about, you could look down from the tower, you could see everything real good. And there was about, I think eventually there were 7 cop cars, and they brought in the FBI. And they were in all of this, all these important white hard hats are just checking the fence, trying to see how I got in and how I got over. And eventually I was up there for 8 hours because they could not figure in how I got in, and they couldn't figure out how to get me down. And eventually they brought in a 200-foot crane, these big cranes, and they slowly brought this huge crane over. And they have this big old, a big old cage. It's kind of like this size, real big. And the first fellow they brought up was the sheriff. And he was in his bulletproof vest in case I had weapons. And he was like, honey, what do you want up here? And I had a huge banner. It was bigger than that almost. It was longer, certainly. And it said, Dow responsible for Bhopal. And I kept just pointing to that flag. And eventually they brought in, they put a four-man SWAT team. And they had the black hat and the black jacket and the black boots and the batons, the black batons. And here I was chained. I had a pipe over my chain, stainless steel. I was completely tied in to the top of that tower. It was a kind of a staircase, totally blocked in. And those four-man SWAT teams, they came up there with a pair of scissors. They were going to cut me out of there. So anyway, needless to say, they eventually drugged me out of there. Threw me in a straitjacket, and I went to trial, and I got 5 months in jail. And in matter of fact, it was Gary that his group was the one that paid for my ACLU American Civil Liberties lawyer. So if I had a good lawyer, it was because Gary's group was the one that paid for him. But I did appeal the sentence because they said I was a very dangerous woman, and it's not so much what I do, it was my ideas were dangerous. And then I had been on my book tour. I wrote a book, so I was on the book tour. And anyway, I'd been on it about a week, and everywhere I'd go, I'd talk about Bhopal and India and Warren Anderson and how come he jumped bail. And suddenly, sheriff calls and says, you show up and go back to jail. And I was like, well, I said, I don't think I'm going to go back to jail until Warren Anderson goes back to jail. Because after all, he jumped bail 13 years ago. It's like, how come he's not in jail? Yep. And so anyway, that's why I've been staying out of Texas. They got a warrant for my arrest. I'm on the lam, and I'm always looking for the Texas Rangers if they're back there anywhere. But anyway, that's really what I've been trying to. My issue lately is to bring up, this whole thing about the corporations and their profit and the damage that they do and how they are never brought to justice. And it's about time that they are. And so that's been my focus. And like I said, I keep saying I'm not going to go to jail until he goes to jail. And matter of fact, if he wants to go to jail, I will. Matter of fact, I've been wanting to find Warren, and he and we could go together. He might be scared. He really might be. They say all kinds of stuff about jail, and it's not nearly as bad as he thinks. And so anyway, that's what. Matter of fact, I think that's my next project. And matter of fact, even after when we start talking, we might talk about how to go about finding Warren Anderson and help him do the right thing. Anyway, that's it.